All right, joining me now to get across this push, started the show with from super funds and today's ICAC hearing, as well as a lot of other news-making headlines here and overseas, is broadcaster and the fabulous Credlin fill-in host, Chris Smith. Chris, thanks very much for your time tonight. I wanted to play that package because there's a lot of sort of murky background to these very serious allegations that are now the subject of an ICAC hearing, just so that people can follow it at home. The main allegation is that Chinese billionaire Huang Zhimo handed over $100,000 in a cash donation to the ALP, and it was said to be coming from a series of people in $5,000 lots to get in and around the laws. Some of them allegedly came from property developers, which is against the rules for state donations in New South Wales. But in fact, it was one big donation from a single individual, which would have disclosure obligations around it. All I can think of, we used to joke in federal politics about Sussex Street, the Labor headquarters in New South Wales, and bags of cash and the brown paper bag days of the Labor Party. But clearly, $100,000 in cash. I can't even fathom what that much money looks like, Chris. I mean, this is extraordinary. It is extraordinary, and they've obviously gone up a notch. Instead of the brown paper bags, they've sort of progressed onto the Aldi plastic bags, which is obviously being climate friendly. But putting that aside, this could be the easiest investigation and probably the easiest prosecution that ICAC ever touches. Here we've got several canaries singing, including those within the Labor Party, including, later this week, Sam Dastyari. And if Sam can get the theatrics out of the way, we might get something decent from him in terms of information. But you've got someone who's actually written from the grave about his involvement in this donation. You've got this Xing Mo, which, bear in mind, has been banned from being in this country, so he's been sent packing. So that's the calibre of the person we're talking about. And here is a bloke who obviously doesn't cross his T's and dot his I's, because we're supposed to believe that kitchen hands at one of these function centres, gave the Labor Party $5,000. As if someone in the kitchen, approximately 27 years of age, gave the Labor Party $5,000. So they've been loose with the truth. You've got an admission, a semi-admission, and it is only circumstantial, coming from the bloke that committed suicide soon after ICAC knocked on the door. But Peter, what do you expect, seriously, from a party where the morality foundations were laid over many, many decades by the one and only Eddie Obeid? Yeah, I will listen very closely to the evidence of Sam Dastyari, because the idea that he, you saw that tweet just then in the package, he's prepared basically to sing for his supper, to tell everyone the insidious nature of these sorts of donation protocols, if I could call them that, ways to get around the rules is the other name for them. But it'll be fascinating, because it seems like he's prepared to tell people everything that went on. And let's not forget, he was a General Secretary before he went into the Parliament. He has those links with the Chinese community, so it will be fascinating. I started the show, Chris, with this real gripe I have by the way in which, for many years, I think the centre-right side of politics watched the growth of the industry super funds, and perhaps benignly thought that they were there to service the workers that were joining unions, etc., and that there would be a competitive market of retail funds, mainly banks and other instos, and that people would have the right to have a self-managed fund. Now, both sides of politics have made self-managed funds very, very hard and complex to operate. Only those with big lots of money would get down in a self-managed fund nowadays. The Banking Royal Commission has made it hard for retail funds to operate. The rules and regulations, and some dodgy funds out there, have had a flight away from them. So then you've really got the growth of the industry funds, and when Labor's in power, they legislate them as the default fund for workers. The unions are there to grow their power. So at a time when membership of unions is sub 15% in the private sector, the real power and the clout for the Labor sort of agenda comes from the institutional shareholding weight of these industry super funds in our big companies. And they are then telling the big companies at shareholder meetings and elsewhere, you'll do it this way, or you'll do it the way that we want on issues, particularly like climate change. Now, today, trying to say to Melbourne Airport, Brisbane Airport, ports, etc., you're going to have a 100% renewable energy target and cost people thousands and thousands of dollars. This is crazy. It is crazy, and making no difference to the temperature of the planet. But putting that aside, here is a situation where
where's the business plan? Cannot the stakeholders, that is the consumers who use these facilities, who maybe just fly, have we been told how much we're going to have to fork out? See, it's all very good, very well, you know, virtue signalling on climate change, which they're all very happy to do. And as you pointed out earlier today, so are the chief executive officers and boards of these companies now. So, OK, jump on the bandwagon, make yourselves look good and great lovers of the environment. But how much is this going to cost? Look what we've heard from Victoria today. Because of their targets in terms of emissions, it may cost every single Victorian an extra $3,000. But people can't afford that stuff. We should have been part of the decision-making process when they decided to come up with these outrageous emissions targets, but we're not. We just have to sit back as commuters, and in the case of the two major airports, sit back and pay the extra charges down the track. Well, sorry, we don't want to, and we don't like what you're doing. That's what the public's saying loud and clear.
Well, also, too, people are voting against it at elections. I mean, the clearest indication of what the people think was the only real election we had where climate change was on the table as a decision, 2013. Do you want the carbon tax to stay or do you want it to go? Abbott won in a landslide. This is not a question that people are even getting a say in, Chris. This is being imposed on them through the super fund. So Labor loses the election. Scott Morrison's elected. He winds back the big push on Paris. Nowhere near as hard as Bill Shorten would go. Unions don't like it. They say, well, bugger you, we'll come around the back door, we'll bring it in as basically a policy of our union funds and use our institutional shareholding weight to determine the policy of this country. Forget Canberra, it's the unions. And
I get the feeling what Scott Morrison has said before he went overseas was, we are going to make a difference in terms of the power the unions have in the workplace and making sure that we can still police misbehaviour by the CFMEU, etc. That is a completely different kettle of fish to what we're discussing tonight, and the power of the unions through superannuation and, of course, this, climate cult where they are infatuated with not emitting any carbon. Why isn't someone in government thinking about, hang on a minute, we need to switch our focus, not just on the union movement, but in terms of the power through super funds, and considering that they don't have as many members as they had, say, 10 years ago, well, you know, we've got to think twice about how much power they should have. But no one's looking at that.
It's the stealth stuff that worries me. I mean, as I said, the centre-right sat there for 3 decades and let this sort of creep occur. We're not talking about unfair dismissal. We're not talking about all the usual red rags to the union bull, which is where the government's focus is. What happened to the rules that the government wanted to impose to say that there had to be independent directors of these union super funds, that they weren't just controlled by union appointees and apparatchiks? Well, that's all gone by the wayside. What happened to unravelling some of the controls that union super funds have on our biggest companies, dictating social policy, dictating virtue signalling by weight of their shareholder leverage? That's where the government's focus should be. And I said in my editorial, you know, a lot of credit to Scott Morrison. He's playing a blinder since the election campaign. But Scott Morrison, and then it's daylight before anyone else in the ministry. Where are they and how are they performing?
Where's the industrial?
I have to say, I haven't seen many of them over this winter break.
No, they're sitting back and they're watching him do it all. Where are the industrial relations ministers and the related portfolios having a go at any of this? They're not. And just the whole implementation of an independent directorship, a percentage of independent directors on a board like this would make a massive difference, would be a contrary opinion within these superannuation boards that would probably shake up some of the influence they're having on business. That would be a great first step, and it wouldn't be hard to do.
Well, it's the rules that every other corporate player has to abide by, but the unions are treated differently, unfortunately, as they always are. I want to go to the issue of the Lindt siege, because I think this is a really important an important point to note, lest it go unremarked. At the time of the Lindt siege, I was working for the then Prime Minister, and the Commonwealth made an offer to send in commandos. So they're based in Sydney. They would have been able to access the CBD relatively quickly. They are trained in the sort of environment that a siege is, and they're probably the best, they and the SAS, the best skill we have in the country. That was rejected. The New South Wales government, with its wisdom, decided to stay with its own people, and, you know, for operational reasons, that perhaps was the right decision. But one of those policemen and others, but one in particular, a sniper whose name we do not know, was suing the New South Wales Police commanders for negligence over the way in which that siege was carried out. He claims he was not given the right sort of commands in order to take out the perpetrator, Harimonis, a lot earlier and perhaps could have saved lives. That's his contention. In any event, this has been settled out of court, Chris. So we'll never really know what went on and what were the concerns of the police, operational police, the snipers and other on the ground, and the way this has been sort of snuffed out by the police hierarchy. That's a worry.
It is a worry, the fact that the hierarchy decided to send in the lawyers and settle the dispute, like you would a workplace dispute. It's not a workplace dispute. It's more important than that. And there are three sickly things, I reckon, Peter, to come out of the Lindt Cafe siege. The fact that we lost 2 people, when some would argue, including the sniper, that we didn't need to lose at least one of those persons. And the third thing to come out, which makes you sick, is the fact that we'll never ever know what went wrong. What were the deficiencies and the dysfunction within the command that we can't hear about? And you make a good point about these commandos that were offered to the New South Wales Police to come in and either take control or contribute to the operation. They also had, in that first 10 hours of the siege, as I understand it, they'd set up almost an identical scenario, and I think it was at Holsworthy Army Base, an identical physical scenario of the Lindt Cafe, and had come up with a way in which they could diffuse what was occurring at the time. And New South Wales Police just ignored that, thinking that they knew all, and they were, you know, they were the independent, free-thinking siege runners, and we will not do anything about it. Well, sorry, they made no contact with the person within the Lindt Cafe, who I won't mention. They made no contact with that person. And if you aren't contacting the person at the centre of a siege, I would have thought there's something dysfunctionally wrong with the way you're handling it. But we'll never ever know.
We'll never know publicly. I know that there were reports, internal reports and external reports, tabled reports at the time in the immediate aftermath, and there was a COAG discussion about getting the lines between the Commonwealth and the state more operationally smooth. But the fact that a police officer, a sniper, had to take his own superiors to court because he felt the process failed and it's now been settled and washed away really worries me. Chris Smith, thanks very much for your time, and thanks very much for the last couple of days as well.
Thank you, no problem. Good to have you back, though.